What's going on, YouTube? This is Andre here from Card Games United with Lee here presenting our build for Royal Paladins. We should have a Kagro profile out pretty later too. Rolling out our decks for Q4. So getting into the...
Just in time for Destructive Roar to come out.
So a little bit of deck commentary. This deck sucks.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This deck has issues. It's not as bad as Nova Grappler, and I guess it does have a chance to be Kagero, so maybe I'm being a little bit of a... maybe I'm being a little unfair to it.
I do find in the Kagero matchup it's pretty miserable to be a Kagero guy just because I like playing a lot of Retire Power, and my Retire Power kind of does nothing because you can just call things so cheaply.
This deck has issues generating resources. It literally, and I mean literally, has zero countercharging capabilities. Especially when you do use a lot of Counterblast in this deck. For a lot of your superior calling effects, it's a bit of a problem. You don't really Soul Chars outside of Pongal, so you only really get one use of Soul Saver.
It is possible to get it up to 2 to 3, but
it's very difficult, especially I think with how quick standard format is these days. You don't ever get to use Soul Saver twice. The biggest issue is it doesn't push for game very well. This deck is consistent, but it's weird that I'm saying this deck is bad, and I'm also saying it's consistent. This might actually be the first deck that's consistent but bad, because it does a very good job of setting up the board you want, and getting those Pongos out for your Soul Saver turn. Just Soul Saver itself does not do a good job of closing out the game, because...
I've said it before, this deck, one of the big issues is that it doesn't have a real game plan.
Yep.
It just sort of wants your opponent to have Ben at 5.
Yeah, and it does it has such a difficult time pushing your opponent to 5, because you're only getting 3 attacks off this deck. And it hits for good numbers, but not enough to, like, say that your opponent will be at 5 by the time you can get Soul Saver, which is the only time that Soul Saver is ever really effective. So without really a big way to, I think, push for game in this deck, as new stuff comes out, I think it's unfortunately going to be doomed to Tier 3 with Nova Grapplers. But they can beat Nova Grapplers, though. With, like, maybe...
The good news is they do also have the half booster coming out.
Yeah, the mini booster should hopefully fix up some of the issues with this deck. Maybe Execute is that finisher that we really want, and maybe we get a countercharger out of that.
Well, I would be looking more for, like, mid-game pressure.
Yeah. The reason I think why I wouldn't say this is a terrible investment, though, is it is a main character deck as well, and we know how Bushiro it is with main character support. So I think this would be a good investment. Just don't expect it to give you competitive returns immediately. Third best deck in the format, in my opinion. But getting into the before I get into the profile, we have these wonderful force markers.
Why not the Kai ones? Why not the Overlord ones? Why not the Blaster Blade ones?
Because I like to have themes. In Royal Paladins, you tend to put the force markers on your rearguard set first, because one of this deck's selling point is the huge amount of pressure that your rearguards can put with the numbers they can reach, and just having the extra 10k is what will help it push. I think maybe once you have your third ride, you can put on the Vanguard, but for the most part, you want these force markers to be on your rearguard circles.
That is one of the interesting things about Royal Paladin as a force clan. It's one of the few that likes to spread them out.
Yeah. Whereas Kagro, you want to put them all on your Vanguard.
Kagro, you want to put them all on your Vanguard. DP, you want to put them all on your Vanguard. Spike Brothers, you want to put them on, like, one specific rear guard.
Yeah, that's because you can keep calling on it. I guess into the profile, here's your starter. This is Glime.
Why Glime?
You don't have another option.
Okay.
So as I go through it, I'll mention some honorable mentions for cards I'm not running but would consider as options. But for now... 4 of our boy, King of Knights, Alfred. A lot of people, I think, were disappointed with this card because it's not a finisher. But this card has a few selling points as to why I don't think it's terrible. This is the first card you want to have in the deck, unless if you rode Blaster Blade, then you might want to go for another card I have in this deck. But this is mostly your first ride or mid-game ride for mid-game pressure, because this calls a Blaster Blade that you need, gives it power. You could combo Blaster Blades, go off that to get some retiring power, and then it's always just a constant 23k Vanguard, because you're always going to have that Blaster Blade. So kind of having that...
You can always call it Blaster Blade.
Yeah. Unless if you run out, then this card sucks.
That is one issue that I've noticed the deck have, that if you end up like damage checking your blaster blades,
it hurts. It definitely hurts a lot. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, which is why I think I had to tech on Alfred early, because they could also get Soul Charge as well.
Somewhere out there has to be someone whose damage zone was just filled entirely with blaster blades
Oh,
and
it's possible.
Pongle.
It's possible.
If they had just entirely Blaster Blade and Pongle in their damage zone, I bet they cried that game.
I think I would just scoop, honestly. But this card does what we needed to do. It's good mid-game pressure. Having constant 10k on it as it swings is not bad. And then deck thins. I just wish there was a better finisher to complement this card, but we can't have everything. But
fortunately, I do think that Royal Paladins do have one of the best finishers in the game right now.
Well, in terms of raw numbers, yes. In terms of like
being able to get, the only one that really competes with it would be like Waterfall.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think this is a 4 in the deck. I don't think there's really much flexibility with it. Next, grade 3. I decided to go 3 copies of Soul Saver as opposed to 4. I felt that 4 was a little bit too clunky. And I think at 3 you see it enough to be your finisher. This is the finisher of the deck. Soul Blast 5 and everything gets 15k, and then when it attacks you may Soul Charge 1, so I guess if you do have to ride this first, that second skill exists. But this absolutely sucks as a first ride. It's terrible.
I've seen people get it off turn 3. It's not impossible.
You want to be on your Alfred and then ride on to this later in the game. The reason I think why I do complain about it is that, like, gaining power is all well and good, but if you're going up against OTT that can just PG you for days, it's kind of a little bit difficult. So I do think that things that have Sentinel Restriction or just multi-attack in general are a little better.
Like I said, I think this is probably one of the best finishers in the game right now. The issue is that, 1, the counterplay has pretty much been solved.
Yeah.
And 2, you don't really have a game plan for how you're going to get them to 5 to really make that aggressive pressure matter.
I think which is why this deck definitely falls off a lot, because it has such a difficult time pushing for a game. Because it's very easy for your opponent just to stand like 3 or 4, and they really just need maybe
just,
1.
Oh, what's that, 70k? Fine, whatever.
PG.
1 damage.
Yeah, 1 damage and then just PG the rest. I think 3 is the perfect ratio, though, for this card. You don't really need to run 4 of it. Oh no, it fell! My tech.
Your tech. Oh no.
So for a card I initially did not run, but kind of grew on me, is 1 copy of Alfred early. And the reason why I run Alfred early is because when you don't run him and you Soul Charge a Blaster Blade, or you have to ride that Blaster Blade, that kind of sucks. So the fact that this guy exists in the deck means that that Blaster Blade that is in your soul is a resource to help you plus. If you failed on a Soul Saver but you have a Blaster Blade in the soul that you kept there, this card can, by calling the Blaster Blade for 10k, it can give you a little bit of a late game push after that. It's not great, but it's just another play that you can do. I don't know, it's a good card as a one-of. And it means that Blaster Blade that otherwise would do nothing in the soul becomes a resource to you later in the game or early in the game if you open up with this in Blaster Blade. Grade 2s. Speaking of which, are you really surprised about this?
Yeah, this should kind of be obvious from the grade 3 lineup.
Next. The crit on the Vanguard is an interesting skill. I think Royal Paladins do have a better chance of winning the game if you can pull off the crit.
I think it's the opposite. I think that people tend to overcommit to the board if they try to get the crit, and once you actually do that, you're opening yourself up for aggression.
That is possible, and I wouldn't recommend it against Kagro just because they can punish you, but I think in the mirror match or against OTT, playing aggressively is the way that you might be able to push them and be able to close out the game quicker, just because I think later in the game, if you play too conservatively and the opponent's able to build up a hand or keep themselves at low damage for a Soul Saver, it's not as effective.
But I've honestly found anytime someone tries to get the crit off, it usually means wasting resources. You're not going to be able to you're not going to be able to use your Akanes or your Luz and Marins that
I
early
I
in the
agree
game,
with
which
you
means
there in that I
you're
think
gonna lose your main advantage in the form of your efficient calling, because you're not going to be able to be efficient
Yeah.
with calling because you're not at high enough damage to have the counterblast.
I think I will agree with you there in that I think if you do want to go for the crit, you need to have like 2 open counterblasts and open up with at least 1, preferably 2 Akanes, so that your superior calling the grade the Pongles from deck and the Akanes are as interceptors anyway, so you're not losing the shield value.
So I think probably the biggest issue with this card is that unless you're in the perfect scenario, all he does is say Blaster Blade.
The retire skill is there. It can be used, but honestly, you have such a difficult charge, and you have such a difficult time in this deck managing your counterblast because you literally don't have a counter charger that you often don't use it. And the Soul Blast hurts because of Soul Saver. Rule of thumb I think I find in this deck is that you are able to spend 1 soul and you have the room to use 1 of your soul. And then the rest you should not use because you want to save up for a Soul Saver. That's been my rule of thumb playing this deck. But I mean, it's Blaster Blade, so...
He says Blaster Blade on
Yeah. The best grade 2 in the deck. For High Dog Breeder, Akane. Akane is Bay, Akane is life.
Akane gets you a call, gets you a soul charge.
There's really not much else you can really ask for. She can get that call. She can call Pongo when she's either a Vanguard or Vanguard, so there's no benefit to riding, or there's no misride when you have to ride her. And she gains 3k when boosted by a High Beast, so if you boost her with the Stallion, she's a 23k column.
There you go, can't argue with that.
Yeah, she's the best grade 2 in the deck. 3 copies of Sage of the Archjaren. He's a free 5k for doing what Royal Paladins do. You just have 3 or more Rigors, he gains 5k. The reason I play him is because he's free, and this deck uses so much counterblasts, and that getting that free 5k off is very nice.
You don't want to run the grade 2 that soul charges?
I did run that for a long time, as you can see on the channel, but the fact that he costed a counterblast meant that he was mostly vanilla, and I would never usually spend the counterblast for that soul charge. Especially also because it has to be boosted, so it's a little more that you have to commit to make him viable, whereas he just exists and is a 5k for doing what Royals do. He was one of my honorable mentions. Another honorable mention, I guess, is Conjurer of Mithril, but it's a 9k Vanguard that also causes a counterblast and a soul blast, so I don't run him. I have seen people that have. It can work because it's essentially extra copies of Akane, but I don't prefer it. Grade 1s, 4 copies of Little Sage Marin. Interestingly enough, this deck actually does have some ways to plus, and this is the one of the cards that helps you plus. So if you don't know what he does, when something in the same column is placed in the same column as him, you can counterblast 1, draw a card, and it gets 3k.
Also, if you don't know, he is a he.
Yeah, it's not a girl. I see people call it a girl. I see people say she, and I just like, ugh. My nerd.
Go watch Minivan. He had a baby.
I don't know. It's a decent card for what we have. It helps you plus.
Also, just go watch Minivan. It's funny.
Yeah. I think the only thing that limits this card's potential is, again, Royal Paladin's lack of countercharging. So you don't actually get to use this as much as you want. But I just run 4 of it anyways, just because, like, against Kagura, I might want to see this to help me replenish my hand when they kill my things or cook them.
It's also just seriously efficient calling.
Yeah. Another staple. 4 copies of Pongol. When he's placed in the same column as something else, you soul charge something, and if it's a trigger, 5k, this is the way that you reach Soul Saver. It is searchable with Akane.
Do take note that it needs to be in the same column as something, because I've seen some people misplay.
Yeah, which is unfortunate. I think the card would be a little bit better if it didn't have that restriction, just because I think if your opponent's at grade 1 and you, for example, ride Akane, counterblast 1, you could just call it and swings for 8k to poke at their grade 1 Vanguard. You could still do that, obviously, because it's searchable, but then you won't get the soul charge. So that's
and
just...
you really, really want that soul charge.
Yeah, the soul charge is crucial for this deck. I don't know, I think I saw one profile where this guy was like, I don't think Pongol's a good card, and I don't run it at 4 because it's searchable, so you only need to run it at 2, which, like, I agree, but you run 4 Akanes, and you want Akane to search for this at almost every time.
Also, that implies that you're only going to get at 2 Akanes.
Yeah. Also, what else do you really have?
Good point.
4
Say,
Pongos.
what else do you have in this deck?
4 Pongles, no question asked. Next is 4 copies of Knight Squire Allen. I was not running this card previously. I was at 0 because I was running 3 Stallions and 3 Morganas. The Morgana was useless.
Oh, Morgana.
Yeah, the Morgana was useless in the locals I went to this deck with. Did not use its effect at all. So running the Allen at least helps, because Allen is also like a Marin. It's a +0 when you call, so you don't lose a card for calling, so it exists as giving you like a free call.
Well, it's a +1.
Because, yeah.
Because you still control the card when it's on board.
Mm-hmm. So basically, I think Marin combines with this to make sure that Royals have some way of, like, other than superior calling, of just like making sure they don't minus off calling. Yeah, it's a good card, especially for the Kagura matchup. I think I was missing it a little bit. Morgana doesn't really do anything for the deck just because, like, you oftentimes don't find yourself soul charging or even wanting it to be an attacker because your grade 2s technically are in the front row instead of Morgana. If Morgana had that effect on boost as well, I would run her, but I don't, so I just choose to run 4 of this. Just because, you know, not much else. 2 copies of the Stallion. Good card, don't think it needs to be running anything more than 2. It gains 3k when you have 4 more regards, so, you know, 10k booster, makes Akane 23k, makes Alfred 33k, hits numbers.
Which is funny because Alfred is already on the horse, and then you boost him with the horse.
Trigger lineup, not really much.
Is there actually multiple possible trigger lineup? Actually, I suppose there is, because you did get a vanilla draw. Are you running the vanilla draw?
Nope.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, 8 crits, 4 draws, 4 heals.
Because you don't have an option.
Yeah, like, technically I guess you could run more draws if you want, but, like, what does that really do for you? This deck has such a, like I said, this deck has such a difficult time closing out games that, like, cutting any of the crits for extra draw power only hurts you, because the crits are kind of important for being able to push your opponent to 5 and Soul Saver becoming viable. I think this is just the only trigger lineup you have, honestly. You shouldn't be running anything else. Oh, and I guess draw triggers are PGs.
Because PGs.
Yeah, I mean, you don't run around the grade 1s because, like, you don't want to, like, cut an Allen or a Stallion. And so these allow you to run cards like that in the grade 1 lineup. So, I mean, that's the deck. Like I said, the deck isn't... It's not as bad as Nova's. I do think it needs some help.
I think, honestly, if you asked my opinion, Royals have a favorable matchup against Kagero, favorable matchup against Nova Grappler, unfavorable against OTT.
Yeah, they have the ceiling, I think, to be the second best deck in this Q4 format, but they also have the floor to honestly be worse than Nova's. They also have the potential to lose to Nova's, actually, I've noticed. I don't know, maybe I just wasn't piloting it well when I did poorly. But then again, it is hard to pilot this deck poorly, because it's so straightforward.
It's very much the definition of, like, the way I define the tiers, where it goes excellent, above average, below average, awful. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4. Mm-hmm. It falls just sort of in that nebulous space between tier 2 and 3, where it's just like, this is a completely average deck.
Yeah, I think in terms of where it'll be after the sets come out, I think after Destructive Roar it could still be okay. Just because
I think it's not going to get shaken from that spot of being just okay for a while, because there's not a lot you can do to affect it.
I think they will lose Tachis and they will lose to Spikes. I guess they might still have a chance to beat Mega Colony. When Champions of Asia Circuit comes out, I think they lose to all 3 decks that come out of that. I will be honest about that. Aquas will be able to beat this, Grand Blue will be able to beat this, and Deep Blues will be able to beat this. But again, it is a main character deck, so there will be a lot of support for it.
Look forward to the mini booster. Yeah.
I'm hoping I'm hoping the mini booster does fix a lot of the issues with this deck, and hopefully it gets better after that. But for now, this is what we have for Bushi. Thanks, Bushi.
Want to leave him with anything?
Magic number of the day is...
I don't have a die.
7.
7. Okay, 7.